Hey, Logan Paul versus KSI, what's up? And today I'm gonna do a mini album reviews thing. Yeah. Alright, so, I'm gonna talk about a few albums. In fact, I'm gonna talk about 4 studio albums and 2 EPs today, because I figured, hey, I really want to talk about these 2 EPs. So without further ado, let's jump into our first entry here. That would be Travis Scott with Astroworld, which has been a very viral and famous album in the rap community because everyone's talking about it. So Travis Scott, come on, everyone knows him. So Travis Scott's debut studio album. What am I even trying to say? Travis Scott's debut studio album, Rodeo, is a great album, but however, his second album, Birds in the Trap, is pretty effortless. It feels like he had lost his touch on the album. And now we have Astroworld, which is actually not as disappointing as Birds in the Trap, and it has better hooks and better production. And again, similar to Rodeo, it has all sorts of beat switches, musical detours, and we also have a lot of amazing features on this album, although there are also a couple of bad features. And the album overall feels very dreamy, euphoric, and psychedelic. And it feels like this is what A$AP Rocky was aiming for when he made Testing. So, literally, Travis Scott fulfilled what A$AP Rocky was trying to fulfill. Anyway, the album starts off with Stargazing, which is easily one of the best trap rap songs I've ever heard this year so far. And I really love the moody bass, the snappy percussions. I like how there are multiple layers of Travis Scott vocals. One of the layers is him saying, "It's lit!" And one of the layers is him singing in a very deep pitch. And overall, it's just a very catchy and dreamy and pure psychedelic track. Rollin', 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 got me stargazing. And then up next we have Carousel, which is also a very psychedelic track, and it also has this crowd sound, which is an odd. And then up next we have Carousel, which is also a very psychedelic track, and it has an odd sample. That is the crowd shouting, chanting. And we also have Frank Ocean in the track, and his chorus is amazing, and his falsetto is, as always, very sweet and passionate. And even though this track sounds a little more dry, it sounds more sharp and sober, yet dreamy. And it adds an interesting quality to the track. The third track is Sicko Mode, and it features Drake out of any person. So that's pretty interesting. I really like the false intro, which sounds super relaxing and smooth. And then it gets into the real instrumental of the track, which is chunky and bouncy, and it has texture, and I love it. And Drake fits really well in this track as well. I'm not saying Drake is a great rapper or anything, but he does a pretty good job on this track. And however, there are lines that Drake had said on this track that I'm not too down for, such as the line where he says he took half a Xanax pill so that he could sleep on the plane. Like, hopefully it's prescripted. Anyway, the fourth track is R.I.P. Screw, Rest in Peace Screw, which is basically a tribute to DJ Screw, and it has wavy synths and warped vocals, and we also get the singing, and the melodies are very spacey. But overall, the song is not that strong. It doesn't make such a strong impression. But the next track really redeems the album once again. Stop Trying to Be God. And oh boy, first of all, the humming from Kid Cudi is amazing. We have never heard Kid Cudi humming on a track. At least I've never heard until 2018's Kids See Ghost, and it worked miraculously. And Kid Cudi humming in this song is just so sweet and soothing with Travis Scott's rapping on top. It's really genius. And then we also have James Blake popping at the end of the track, and his vocals are amazing. And then we also get the harmonica, and maybe, assumably, it's Stevie Wonder's out of all people. And this track overall feels very sweet and very dreamy. Stop trying to be God. And then we have No Bystanders, which has a pretty interesting intro to the track about Travis Scott panicking on the plane. And it sort of echoes with Drake earlier on the album, saying, he took half a Xanax pill on the plane. So it's kind of a weird thing, weird intro. And we also get these gang chants, fuck the club up. And it's just a very strange track. Although musically it's cohesive, but thematically it's very disjointed, and it's kind of here and there. But still, I really enjoy No Bystanders. It's not one of the best tracks on the album, but it's still pretty good. And then up next we have Skeletons, which is equally as dreamy and sleepy, and I also really like this nostalgic element to the track. And Tame Impala is on this track, and that's the reason for the crispy psychedelic pop sounds on this track. And even though the Travis verses on this track sounds kind of flat, and the Weeknd vocals towards the end feels very buried under the instruments. It's kind of hard to recognize the Weeknd, but still I like the track instrumentally. And then you have Wake Up, which is where the Weeknd actually makes an appearance, a complete appearance. And even though the lyrics on this track is a little funny, her pussy's so good, her pussy's so sweet, but I just love how blunt and sensual and lustful this track is. And I also really like the instrumentals, which are basically some sturdy and sweet guitar pinches, but in the middle of this track we get these trippy synths that just layers onto the track really well. And then we also have 5% Tint, which is also a pretty good track. I love the goofy, regal pianos. It sounds like Travis is sort of slightly influenced by classical music a little bit. And I also really enjoy the ghoulish laughs. It sounds Halloween-ish. And also, the swells of strings and synths are also pretty smart. And the outro of the track is heavenly. And we also have NC-17, which is a little more odd than the previous tracks. It's a trap rap song, but it still has its elegant side. And 21 Savage at the end spits a pretty nice verse. It's one of the better features that 21 Savage had ever done. And then we have Astrothunder, which sounds very psychedelic and folky because John Mayer and Thundercat is involved, surprisingly. And I just love how focused and sturdy and detailed the instrumentals are. And this track also deals with, being distant from reality, and that pairs really well with the instrumentals. And then we have the second half, which falls a little flatter. Doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just a little flatter. So first of all, we have a Yosemite. Yeah, it's one of the weaker tracks on the track list, and Nav's verse in the end. A lot of people are memeing about this, but I don't know what for. Like, Nav appeared on this track, but he only pops up towards the end where the song was already kind of fading away, and his verse is buried deep under many layers of instrumentals. So I don't know what the hell Nav's doing here. And then we have Who? What? Which is, again, very, it's a listenable track. It's decent, but the flow is a little awkward, and Migos' performance towards the end, the second half of the track, is a little underwhelming. And then we have the track Can't Say, which sounds really dreamy and psychedelic as well, but it feels it kind of it feels kind of average and generic relatively compared to tracks earlier on the album. And also the track Butterfly Effect, which is one of the lead-up singles to this album. The verses are actually okay. Melodically, it's okay, but still, not that impressive. The album Ender Coffee Beans is a way more surprisingly low-key and laid-back track. The instrumentals are way more sturdier and clearer, and the beat is way more clear as well. But at the end, it just kind of fizzes out, so it's a little disappointing. And we also get the track Houston Fornification. Yeah, Houston Fornification, one word. It's although this track is actually pretty decent, but compared to the tracks earlier on the album, it doesn't feel that important. So the second half, or more like the last third of the album, it's a little more underwhelming. But still, the first 2/3 of the album is amazing, and it's some of the best trap music I've heard this year yet. So my favorite track in here is the album opener Stargazing, and my least favorite, I actually don't know. Probably somewhere between Yosemite and Who What. I'm giving Travis Scott's Astroworld a 7 to an 8 out of 10. And then let's talk about another good rap album, which would be Denzel Curry's Taboo, with the B replaced by 1-3, because why not? But anyway, Denzel Curry is also one of the more mainstream rappers who really got famous because of that Ultimate song, which many people had memed before. And anyway, on this album, it's kind of separated into 3 acts: light, gray, and dark, and each act has 4 to 5 songs, so overall it's about 12 to 15 songs. 13 songs, actually. So let's start off by talking about the first act, light. We have the title track, which is very dreamy, very soft and soothing, even though lyrically and conceptually it's kind of dark. So I don't know if this track really should be belonging to the light act, even though it's a pretty good album opener. It's just that I'm not a huge fan of rap albums when they start off very humbly, like a slow, quiet, soft opener. I'm not a huge fan of that, but this track is still pretty beautiful, pretty catchy, and it's a really good tone setter for the rest of the album. And again, the lyrics on this track is pretty dark. The person that Denzel's rapping about is a person who got molested at a young age, which leads to a lot of struggles in that person's life later on. So it's kind of dark as an opener. Kind of dark as an opener for the light act. Anyway, the second track is amazing, though. Easily my favorite track on the entire album, and honestly one of the best songs of the year so far, and that is Black Balloons. It's super summery, super catchy, it's super fun to sing along to. Let it flow, 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 let it flow by me. And the flow and the delivery by Travis Scott is excellent on this track. His flow is amazing, and overall it's just such an amazing song. And Gold Link's feature on this track is not bad either. And then we have Cash Maniac, which is probably the most uplifting and feel-good song on the entire track list. And this track also has this dreamy West Coast feel to it that I really enjoy because, given that Denzel Curry is not from the West Coast. And I also really like the singing, even though at first it sounds a little weird. It sounds like it It's off, it's one note off, but it's intentional. And the Peter Griffin reference is also kind of funny. And the last track on the act is called Sumo, which is a track that I don't really care for, however, and it's one of the singles, because it feels like another average generic trap banger, and there's nothing that special about it. The only thing that's good about it is pretty much Denzel Curry's aggressive delivery. And to start out the second act, we get a Super Saiyan Superman, which sounds even more average and unoriginal and bland and generic of a trap song than Sumo. So I'm not a huge fan of this track. In fact, I think it's kind of underwhelming, kind of disappointing. But up next we have Switch It Up, which is more of a return to form for Denzel Curry on this album. And this track is about bipolarism, it's about being inconsistent, and instrumental-wise, it's really harsh, it's really on point. And it has this trap, very, very hardcore trap beat, yet it still sounds somewhat different from the beat we hear on Sumo or Super Saiyan Superman, and it's kind of a special track. But up next we have Mad I Got It, which is essentially about jealousy and envy, and I love the spacey and painful and moody melody of the track, and it's played out on I believe they are pianos, and they are very plucky and eerie, and I love it. But the best track, in my opinion, on this act is Sirens, featuring JID or JID. I just love how disorienting the melody feels. It's kind of hard to describe, because at first it doesn't sound catchy at all, but then it starts to grow on you, and it becomes a great instrumental when it finally clicks. And it sounds kind of humble, kind of wondrous even. And there are also a lot of social commentary on this track about, the MAGA hat, Donald Trump, yada yada, you know that. But it still is an amazing song, and JID, or JID, JID is amazing on this track. And, JID has been amazing as usual, but on this track, even more amazing. So I'm definitely looking forward to his LP as well. And to end off the act, we have Cloud Cobain, which I'm not too crazy about the first time I hear it. But, conceptually, this track is very special, and the topic that it touches upon is a topic that needs to be discussed nowadays. Because it's about viral internet rappers who are basically doing this thing called clout chasing, and it's about the things that people would do in order to gain attention. And I feel like that is really an issue amongst celebrities nowadays, ranging from YouTube celebrities to SoundCloud rappers even. And it's kind of sad that whenever we talk about Kurt Cobain, immediately in our heads we think about suicide, even though Kurt Cobain himself wouldn't want us to think that about him. So that's kind of sad. Anyway, the third act is called Dark, and it starts off with the Blackest Balloon, which is a very twisted and somewhat horrifying track even. The beat is very industrial and simple. It goes up and down 2 notes in a very harsh and loud way. And it's about some morbid things that happened around Denzel himself. And there's one line saying, "Ain't shit changed since Lil Peep died." And I agree with this statement a lot, because Lil Peep died because he overdosed. And a lot of rappers nowadays still glorify taking drugs as if it's a cool thing, as if it's a thug thing, but no. What are you thinking? Anyway, we have Percs, which is actually a really great banger. The flow is amazing, and I love these random descending guitars that are really bright, and it just gives this track a great texture. And then we also have Vengeance, which is somewhat similar, even though the instrumentals aren't as, I guess, colorful or interesting. And the hook is and overall it's a decent song. But what really makes this song good is JPEG Mafia's presence. I don't know why, but JPEG Mafia's presence on this track makes this track sound super mature and super full of personality. It's so full of personality. And the album ends off with BMT, or Black Metal Terrorist, which is an amazing album ender. I really like the intro to the track, and which is sort of like a chorus, but then it's not a chorus. Finish 'em, Zeal. Finish 'em, Zeal. And it just has these blasts of piano keys and guitars and, I believe, xylophones. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then it breaks into this very cold-blooded and harsh instrumental, and it just gets even more aggressive when Denzel Curry jumps in, because his delivery in here is very hardcore and aggressive. And at the end, it just has this instrumental break, and it ends off the album very solidly. And yeah, overall, I'm really satisfied with the track and the album ending. My favorite track on the entire album is Black Balloons, and my least favorite is Super Saiyan Superman. I'm giving Denzel Curry's Taboo an 8 out of 10. Up next, we have Zeal and Ardor with Stranger Fruit. So Zeal and Ardor is a band led by Swiss-American musician Manuel Ganu. Sorry if I had pronounced this wrong, but yeah, Manuel Ganu. Anyway, this album that they just released, Stranger Fruit, is, it's full of all sorts of crazy genres mixed together, blended together. Spirituals, black metal, garage rock, ambient, drone, electronic music, it's all blended together. So this album is crazy. It's whack. But that's also one of the reasons why I like it a lot, because it's so experimental. It's ballsy, it's daring. It's really weird, but it's very creative, and actually it sounds very nice at the same time. So anyway, the album starts off with intro, which sets the tone for the rest of the album. And I actually kind of like the intro cut. It has some forlorn vocals, and it's a pretty nice starter. But then we get to the first actual track on the album, Gravedigger's Chant, which I don't quite like, to be honest. It sounds a little bit hideous. It sounds like it's ironically optimistic and uplifting, and it's a pretty odd way to open off the album. But still, I'm not saying that it's terrible, it's just an odd placement in the track list. And then we have Servants, which is actually an amazing track, blending spirituals and black metal together. I love the howling and bellowing vocals. They are somewhat muscular and meaty, and I also like how death, the theme of death, is played out in this track like a symbol, and it's also played out on the rest of the album really well and really creatively. And it's also one of the rare times this year where I truly thought black metal would be angry. I know that sounds kind of strange, but usually when I listen to extreme metal music, it doesn't feel angry. It feels destructive, it feels chaotic, but it doesn't feel angry, like genuinely, humanly angry. But on this track, it genuinely feels humanly angry. And I just love the chants, the chorus, Servants, join us. It almost feels like Manuel is trying to tell people to join a cult or something, and it's pretty interesting. Anyway, we have the track Don't You Dare, which is one of my literally my favorite track on the entire album. I really like the black metal guitars in the beginning, as well as the lead vocals, the spiritual vocals, and they accompany with each other really well, unexpectedly well. And overall, it's a very thrilling song, and at the same time, it's oddly catchy, even. And then we have Fire of Motion, which is a more black metal oriented track, and it's very blistering, very loud, very destructive. And after that, we have The Hermit, which is an oddball on the track list, although not as odd as some of the tracks later on the album. It's a strange ambient track, and it's ambient sound composed of moody, drowned out harmonies, vocals, and it's really weird, but I still appreciate it for what it is, and I appreciate how it acts as a breather for, the harsh music that we're gonna listen up next. We have Row Row, which is more fast-paced, and the beat is more smooth, it's more driving. I also really love how rough this track sounds, and how raw and nasty and dirty this track sounds. It gives the entire album a lot of personality and a lot of outstanding texture. Special texture, I don't know. And this track is really well assembled as well. And so is a lot of other tracks. Very well composed and assembled and arranged. And the next track, Ship on Fire, is also very loud and blistering and destructive. It has these eerie Latin chants that is mixed and buried under these very loud, soaring guitar riffs. And this track also has a very ambitious build-up that leads to sort of a crazy explosive climax. I really enjoy that. And then we have The Fool, which is another weird-ass track. And it sounds like a strange sci-fi soundtrack. And basically it's a synth track. It's all synths. And it's way more softer than any other track in here. And it sounds kind of romantic, and it acts as a breather, and it just grown on me a lot, and I'm starting to actually enjoy the track, even though it's such an odd track. And we also have other tracks that I really enjoy, such as the track We Can't Be Found. It has some really harsh and aggressive thrash metal riffs, and we also have some more chilling chants and eerie vocals. We have the track We Ain't Coming Back, which is another heavy ballad, soulful ballad, similar to Gravedigger's chant, except it's even softer. And it's again, the themes of death and trauma is really well played out on this track, and the falsetto on this track is actually pretty sweet. And the title track, I also really dig the title track. It's more industrial, and it has these bombastic, boomy drums that reminds me a lot of the percussions used in Nine Inch Nails tracks. And I also really like the eerie, drowned out vocals. They feel very haunting, just repeating in the back. But other than that, the album ends off pretty weakly with Waste, which has some boring chord progressions, and the singing is kind of underwhelming. The album ending, Built on Ashes, although it sounds very moody and scary, but it's still not as well arranged, not as innovative compared to the other tracks earlier on the album. The track Solve is like The Fool, another synth track, but this time it's blander, it's more redundant, and it's more unnecessary. And then we have Coagula. Even though it sounds really cool, it sounds like a cult singing at the same time with this weird accent, which is pretty cool. But it feels like it leaves a lot to be desired. This track could have developed into a bigger and more complete track, except instead it just ended off like this. Yeah, it's a pretty weird chanty detour. But despite the somewhat weak ending and weak beginning, the most middle parts of the track, most of the album still sounds amazing, still sounds very innovative and creative. And my favorite track here is the Don't You Dare, and my least favorite, Waste. Yeah, Waste. I'm giving Zeal Ardor's Stranger Fruit an 8 out of 10. Alright, and then up next I'm going to talk about Tony Molina's Kill the Lights, which is an album I'm sort of anticipating because the premise of the album itself sounds incredibly interesting. It's basically a 14, or was it an 11? I forgot, but a very short album. When you think the Kanye releases this year are really short, listen to this. It's just around 11 minutes long, and it has more songs than those on Ye albums. Crazy, right? 10 tracks, around 11, 12 minutes long, and it's a breakup album. And compared to Tony Molina's previous album, Dissed and Dismissed, it sounds way clearer, way cleaner, and it sounds less exciting. Therefore, it's not as, not as impressive as Dissed and Dismissed, even though this album is still not bad. If there's one big thing that I don't like about this album is that the lyrics, they are just recycled back and forth, like, you're the only one I've found, I'm still waiting for your call, I don't want to live this life alone, I'm still thinking about you, yada yada. Yeah, it's a breakup album, but these lyrics are pretty basic, to be honest. But there are also a lot of sweet tracks on the album that I really dig, especially the album opener, Nothing I Can Say. It's a very sweet intro cut, yet at the same time it's really sad and relatable. It reminds me a lot of Weezer and Car Seat Headrest. Early Weezer, by the way, not the Weezer now. And the second track, Wrong Town, it's a very sad and emotional guitar ballad. At the same time, it sounds very sweet, and I love it. I love it a lot. And we also have tracks like Jasper's Theme, which is more uplifting and more rock-oriented, and it also has a quality to it, a folky hymn quality to it. But still, it sounds incredibly sweet, and I enjoy it a lot. The track Give He Take You is also a pretty good track, and it has some nice, sweet guitars, and it sounds like a really sad and sweet and satisfying goodbye song, even though it's not satisfying at all. And the track Before You Go is also one of the better tracks on the album. It's sad, it's hollow, and when Tony Molina says, "We're both so alone," it just feels like you can feel his emotions through the music. But there are also tracks on the album where I just feel like where I just find kind of underwhelming. Like the track Afraid to Go Outside, which is awkwardly uplifting, upbeat for some reason, and it also sounds a little childish, like one of those songs for kids, so I'm not too big of a fan of this track, as well as the next track, Now That She's Gone, which sounds like a Beatles song, an outdated Beatles song. And we have the track When She Leaves, which is actually not bad. It's decent, but it's a bit bland in my opinion, even though it's sweet. But again, I know it's a weird, really, really weird, out-of-the-world comparison, but this track sounds like You Raise Me Up a little bit. Except it's a breakup song, And then the next track, Look Inside Your... Losing Touch / Look Inside Your Mind. It sounds like one of those old 70s folk rock tracks. that sounds very outdated. And it reminds me of one of those, like modern Christian songs for some reason. And then we have the guitar bits in the middle, which sounds like guitars straight off of Pink Floyd's Echoes. So, I don't know. And the outro as well. The guitars, they sound like Eagles. They sound like Pink Floyd. And in an uninteresting way, basically. But yeah, the outro, it leaves a lot to be desired. It feels like it needs a more solid closer, definitely. And the vocals on the entire album overall feels like one of those, I know it's a really weird comparison, but it sounds like those singing from old Disney cartoons for some reason. But overall, this album is still very sweet, very sad, emotional, and relatable, and it's a very interesting premise to make an 11-minute long breakup album. Or was it 14 minutes long? I don't know. I'm giving Tony... Okay, yeah, the best track is Nothing I Can Say. My least favorite track is probably the Afraid to Go Outside. I'm giving Tony Molina's Kill the Lights a 6 to a 7 out of 10, a light 7. And then let's talk about the 2 EPs, alright? Spiritual Cramps, Police State, and Chainsmokers, Side Effects, ... Sick Boy EP. I know this video is already long enough, but just hear me out. To be honest, Spiritual Cramps Police State EP is one of the best EPs I've heard in 2018. Even better than the 2 new Igloo Ghost EPs, to be honest, surprisingly. I don't know, I just have this thing for post-punk music. It's like it's a genre for me, you know? But seriously, this EP is really, really solid. It has 4 tracks, but 4 really good tracks. The first track on the EP is called Spiritual Cramp, which is directly named after the band itself. And it just has this very gargly and rough and raw mutant post-punk rock sound that I really enjoy. It's a really well-executed aesthetic, and the chorus itself is very exciting. It reminds me of King Gizzard and the OCs, a lot, strangely, and somehow, and it's just a very exciting and energetic EP opener. I was about to say album opener. And then we have 850 Bryant, which is a very good song. It's pretty good, but it's probably my least favorite out of the 4. And then we have I Feel Bad Being Me, which is a single that I really, really enjoyed. The guitars from the beginning of the track feels like the guitars on London Calling by The Clash. So that's pretty interesting. I don't call it a ripoff though, because musically it's not really it doesn't sound like London Calling at all, but the guitars they sound similar. But the vocals, the melodies itself on the track is really nice, and I just love how there's this very steady 4/4 beat carrying the track. And the album ender, the EP ender, Blood Clot, the verses, they actually sound really great and for some reason catchy and nostalgic. The choruses, they are somewhat weaker, but I still enjoy them nonetheless. So I really enjoy this EP overall. I'm giving it an 8 out of 7. Yeah, my favorite track is I Feel Bad Being Me, and description below. And then, of course, we need to talk about something bad on every mini-album review video. And this time we're going to talk about Chainsmokers, because they're great. They released an EP called Sick Boy. No, not Sick Boy. Side Effects, ... Sick Boy. it's the same format of memories ... do not open. Okay, so anyway, 4 tracks, and they made a music video for all 4 of the tracks, which is ridiculous. Anyway, the first track, Side Effects, featuring, guess who? Guess who's being featured? Oh, Emily Warren. Of course. Duh. Like, as if she's not featured enough in Chainsmokers songs. But yeah, this track, it sounds... It's a very trash track. Although not as corny and cringy as most of the tracks off of their last album, it's still a really generic track, both lyrically and instrumentally, and it feels like they're not even trying. And then we have, oh, Everybody Hates Me. This track is just plain terrible. Plain terrible. I don't know why are there people who are getting crazy over this track, because this track is cringy. It's basically Drew Taggart whining about not being popular when he goes into the club. And then after he talks about that, he continues to talk about drinking tequila with his friends and stuff. What? But yeah, it's a... musically speaking, instrumentally speaking, it doesn't do that much either. It's not even catchy. So I don't know the appeal of the track. I don't understand it. The third track is You Owe Me. Again, it's not catchy. It's not even catchy. Like, if you want to make mainstream pop music, at least be catchy. You know, at least make the song sugar-coated. The lyrics on this track is very awkward once again, and the music video is even more stupid. On the music video, literally, Drew Taggart and the other guy, whatever his name is, invites their friends over to their house and then eats them because they are actually vampires. That's not a good way to treat your friend, you know. Inviting them to your house and then eat them alive, not polite, not that polite of a way to treat your friend, but whatever, you do you. And then the album ends off with Sick Boy, which is probably the best track out of the 4. I kind of like the verses, you know, I'm born on the west side of America, the east side. Lyrics-wise, I mean, it's not profound lyrics, but it's not cringy either. And for some reason, it kind of reminds me of Rihanna's hit track Diamond. But then anyway, we have the chorus of the track, which is pretty bland and generic and average. So there's nothing to expect on this track really. So overall, it's a pretty trashy EP. I'm kind of feeling a 4 out of 10 for this. Although it's not as corny or as cringy of a migraine their last album is, this EP still kind of sucks. And there you have it. Have you listened to these albums and EPs from 1 to 10? How much did you rate them? Like if you like them, hate if you hate them, and subscribe if you want more.